Hello there, my name is James Croft and I am recording this video for the Lake Charles Freethinkers art show. I am in New Bedford, Massachusetts right now, the place where Herman Melville's Moby Dick was set and begins, so it seems very appropriate to be recording this video here, and I'm recording it for the second time because the first time the file seems to not have got through, so this is a second attempt, so I hope very much you get this. I feel very privileged to have been asked to address you on the subject of humanism and art today, because it's one of my favorite topics and one of the most important ones I think that humanists need to address. And I feel very connected to the topic of humanism and art because I have always, since my earliest years, been an artist. When I was a child, I was a choir boy, and I used to spend many weekends and weekdays practicing song, religious song, in my school's chapel. And I liked it. I liked the symbolism, the sense of ritual, and most of all, I loved the music. I remember once as a choir boy going up to the altar to be blessed by the priest because I'd never done it before and I wanted to see what it felt like. And I watched him move down the aisle, blessing each child in row by pressing his hand against their head. And when he got to me, he put his hand on my head and he pushed down really hard, as if he was trying to squeeze God in there. And I thought to myself, maybe he knows I don't believe in any of this. Because I was always an atheist. I was raised in a non-religious family, but a non-religious family that really appreciated the arts and culture. And so I was always surrounded by them. I was a choir boy, as I've said. I have been an actor and singer all my life, and I'd love to visit the theatre, the museums, art galleries, and things like that. So culture and the arts have always played a huge role in my life. And when I sought out humanist groups, I found that they were intellectually vigorous, challenging, very smart, but not really full communities in the sense that I'd found my religious spaces that I'd sang in to be. And I think that one of the reasons why they weren't communities in the same sense is that they suffer from what I call a symbolic poverty. A poverty of art, music, symbol, narrative that is particularly problematic for humanists. And that's why I think it's extraordinarily important that groups like yours are hosting art shows to demonstrate humanist values through art. And I want to give a few ideas on that topic today. My thesis, in a nutshell, my argument, is that while religions use a full range of symbolic resources to convey their ideas and ideals, images, architecture, music, ritual, clothing, narrative, humanism, in contrast, uses a very limited palette of symbolic resources. We're very good at written arguments and debates, which tend to be quite heady, but we don't do much else. We tend not to sing together. We tend not to paint about our values. We tend not to write novels about them. And I believe this is a problem because it limits our reach as a movement and stifles our voice, rather like a painter who only uses a limited range of colours from the palette is limited somewhat in their range of expression. We limit ourselves in our range of expression by relying on only a very small range of symbolic resources when we talk about humanism. Now, we all understand the power of the arts and symbol. If you think of some of the greatest religious narratives, the story of Jesus, Moses and the burning bush, Jonah and the whale, many of us know these stories intimately, even if we are not and never have been members of that religion. Stories travel, they stick. They're a form of art that's a powerful way of conveying ideas, and that's one of the reasons why religions are so powerful. Any of us who's ever been to a gospel concert, even if we don't believe the theology, know how rousing and exciting such a concert can be, because music is a sort of universal language which inspires and excites us, even if we don't necessarily agree with what the people are singing about. And religions use these shared artistic forms, shared narratives, shared music, shared images and rituals to bring their communities together, to communicate more easily with each other and mobilize action. Think of the song Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. It's a great song, and many of us know it even if we're not Christian. Well, that song used religious imagery like that of angels and salvation, and also referred to salvation in a worldly sense as freedom from slavery. And that song, when sung together in a community, gave them hope, bolstered their strength and courage. It provided them with a set of psychological resources which were essential if they were going to fight the terrible sin of slavery. So singing together is a way of communicating ideas and strengthening community at the same time. It's extraordinarily powerful. That song, for instance, was used to alert people to the arrival of the Underground Railroad. So it was also a form of social activism, a way of communicating without other people knowing what you're communicating. And that's what the arts can do for us. They can do all sorts of things like this for us because they are very, very rich, deep symbolic resources that carry many meanings. And if humanism, I'm arguing, doesn't take on those same sorts of symbolic resources, we're limiting our capability to communicate with people that we might want to reach. I'm particularly influenced in my work by the research of Putnam and Campbell, who are sociologists who wrote the book American Grace, which is an enormous study of American religion. And they found that religious people give more to charities, both religious and secular charities, volunteer more time for social causes, and are more politically active. They vote more, they're more likely to run for office. By about 2 times. They're about twice as civically active as people who are not religious. But they found, amazingly, that that wasn't to do with their faith, the strength of their belief in God, but it was to do with how regularly they attended a moral community, like a church congregation or a temple or a synagogue or something like that. And I want to suggest that symbolism, narrative, and the arts are central to the creation of moral communities. And that one reason why many humanist communities don't feel as close and together as religious communities is that they don't engage in communal expressions of their values through art. And I have some funny evidence for this. There's a really great online activist organization called the Harry Potter Alliance. And what they do is they use the symbols, characters, and stories of the Harry Potter books to mobilize people to action around civic issues. So, for instance, they have a house cup where people who choose to be members of the different Harry Potter houses, like Hufflepuff and Gryffindor and things like that, compete with each other to do the most good. They have this saying, "What would Dumbledore do?" referring to the great old wizard in those stories. And in their campaign against Walmart and improper hiring practices, they use the plight of the house elves to work against that by talking about how Hermione worked to free the house elves from their terrible hiring practices. And so they basically use the symbolic resources of the Harry Potter books, that artwork, to engage people in civic action. And since they started in 2009, they have done a huge amount of good. They've donated 55,000, now probably more, books to people around the world, including 20,000 to community centers in the Mississippi Delta and 4,000 to a youth village in Rwanda. They called over 1,500, they called over 3,500 phones in just one day, advocating for marriage equality in partnership with Massachusetts Equality. A 12,000% increase on their normal one-day phone numbers. And they're able to achieve those sorts of good deeds, I suggest, because they piggyback on well-known artistic narratives, the Harry Potter stories, that really excite and engage people's imaginations and encourage them to act. And I want to suggest that if humanists do this more often, more art shows like yours, more singing, more beautiful buildings within which to celebrate their ideas, then we could be much more significant and important. Because in contrast to religions, humanism is very symbolically anemic. We have few stories, they're not widely known. And sometimes we seem allergic to ritual. Even singing together or lighting a candle when someone's died seems to be something we don't want to do because it seems too religious. We don't like the idea of being led, and I think that we allow that fear of having a dear leader, someone who is a great authority who we can't question, prevent us from engaging artistically fully in the way that we might to make a more potent community. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think that humanism should become a religion or is one with dogma and mysticism and hierarchy and things like that. Nor do I want to spend every Sunday kneeling and thinking about Richard Dawkins. I don't want to go about in a big humanist hat and a crook of reason to shepherd the flock. But I do think that humanism, if it's going to be a force for good in the world, does need to engage more fully in the arts and find ways to add a few more colours to our symbolic palette, so we're painting our ideals more richly and vividly so more people follow us. And I want to suggest, to conclude, that there are rich seams within the humanist tradition which could make amazingly inspiring artworks, human achievements in science and in other fields which we could mine for extraordinary symbolic resources. I like to think, for example, of the eradication of smallpox. Smallpox was a disease that is estimated to have killed 300 to 500 million people during the 20th century alone, and probably killed Ramses V of Egypt, so it's been with us a long time. We eradicated it in 1979, an international effort of human beings working using our reason, our best understanding of the world, eradicated that disease so it will never kill another person. That's a profound humanitarian effort, humanism at its best. And yet very few people know much about it. Where are the operas to the eradication of smallpox? Where are the beautiful murals and canvases that could express that great achievement? Maybe one of you will create them. That's the sort of story I think we could use to really excite people. What about Norman Borlaug and the wheat revolution? He was a guy who, through development of many different strains of wheat, particularly half-dwarf varieties, fed hundreds of millions of people. People who wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for him. He used genetic crossbreeding, the best technology at the time, the best scientific information, to bring about a revolution in food technology that saved the lives of millions of people. That's a great humanist value in action, reason, and we could use that to make wonderful works of art that convey what we care about. And what about the wonderful fact that we're living on this extraordinary planet in the midst of as far as we can tell, an otherwise empty universe, a universe empty of life? I think of the pale blue dot image, which Sagan had Voyager 1 take as it left the solar system. He had to request that that spacecraft be turned around to capture the photo as it left the solar system. He had the imagination to realize that that image would be a powerful symbol of human solidarity and significance amid a vast and empty universe. And that is a sort of story and image that we can use to build a rich artistic tradition of humanism. I'm excited that groups like yours are beginning to build that history by holding art shows, and I hope that more humanist communities do that. You are a model for humanist communities everywhere. I thank you for the great work you're doing. I wish I could be there with you. Keep making humanist art. Thanks so much.